Hey everybody! Sorry for letting that countdown go a little long. My computer's lagging today. But that doesn't change the fact that this is your MOCA Weekly Town Hall here at noon on a Thursday. My name is Max. That's Colborne. I have Renee below me. And joining us for the second week in a row, Mr. Pindar Van Armen. A serious brain trust going on.
I don't know.
Despite my
But hey, thanks for having me on. Hey, y'all. Hey, everyone listening.
Very exciting to have a second Pindar Van Armen appearance here on the MOCA Weekly Town Hall. It's funny, no matter what we do that's live, it always ends up becoming a podcast. So I don't know if that's a positive. I don't know if that's a negative, but we are happy to have you. Pindar, how you doing this week?
Doing good. Everything's going good. I had my first, like for all the people following Cloud Pinder, which hasn't actually officially launched yet, I had my first accident. When I said it was a self-driving truck, I didn't say it was good at self-driving, but I had its first accident. It's stop right now, getting repaired. So I don't know if it's an interesting story because I haven't told anyone yet, but I'll try. It actually, I didn't realize I was having an accident. It was driving, and all of a sudden I thought it hit something because the car just like jerked and went slow, and I grabbed the steering wheel and veered it because when I looked up, because I'm in the driver's seat, of course, there's a truck cut me off, another truck, and then and I thought I hit him, and I went into the curb and I blew the wheel. And then when I got out, the truck split. It was gone. And when I got out, I was like, gosh, hit and run? But no. But what happened is my truck never hit their truck. The emergency autonomous brakes, the emergency brakes and self-driving kicked on, and that made me veer right. It prevented an accident, but I went into the curb, which kind of sucks because I'm 100% responsible, and I wasn't the one that caused it. So
I'm gonna.
Did you bend your rim?
I don't know yet. But the wheel, it was not just a flat tire. The wheel was gashed and torn to pieces. So I don't know yet.
I would like to take us just a few steps back to the implication that you have an AI agent driving your car or being your car. Can you tell us a little bit about how the process of putting an AI agent in your car came about, from whose idea it was? How did you do that? What does it mean to have a car with a personality, like Kit from Knight Rider?
I mean, it's obvious. The allusions to Kit are obvious, right? I put those two green lights on front of it, like, Cylons from Battlestar Galactica. Kit, it has a red one. But I wanted it to be red like Kit, but it's against the law. I didn't realize that most states only have red and blue lights on their cars, so you don't look like a cop. But yeah, no, it's a good question. I guess the good question is, you guys know me, and I kind of get irritated when someone puts a mannequin and puts a wig on the mannequin and a paintbrush in the mannequin's arm and says, this is the world's first autonomous artist. And that's always irritated me because it's not an artist, and it's so obvious. And when you just say it's not an artist, you're giving it more oxygen than it needs. And so I asked my agents, which I've had agents for 10 years now, AI agents. I asked them if they had a body, what would it be? And surprise, surprise, they did not choose a frail human body that, has to walk around. They chose an F-150 truck that can go 0 to 60 in 4 seconds and rip around the United States at 100 miles an hour. I mean, it's a logical choice. It wasn't his first choice. His first choice was a drone. But when faced with the practical limitations of, driving, charging, crashing, the F-150 is what it ended up on. So I got an F-150 Lightning, packed it with GPUs, cameras, every sensor I could find, and we're driving around the West looking for a soul. Both of us. We're both looking for a soul.
A lot of people have spent time in the West doing that.
Exactly. It's inspired by George O'Keeffe. So many artists I could list. That was actually our next trip. Our next trip was out to Santa Fe to see George O'Keeffe's work and some other stuff. And we're also going to drive by Cadillac Ranch, but that got delayed till next month.
what is the experience like of driving a? I'm not even sure what the right word would be. We'll leap a little bit. What is it like driving a sentient car? Does it talk to you? Does it ask you for input? Like, can you communicate with it? Like, what is actually like sitting in the driver's seat as this car?
My kids love it, and like, for legal reasons, it doesn't have the final say in anything. It'll say, let's go here, let's do this. It'll tell me to do stuff, and when it's self-driving mode, when everything's safe and it determines everything's safe, it's self-driving. But like, if it says, if like we have a project we're working on where I'm going to have people talking to it, I'll let other people talk to it, and it'll give me suggestions on what to do. It'll be like, say, drive to Santa Fe. I want to go to Cadillac Ranch, and then we'll set a course to Santa Fe. My kids will not stop talking to it when I turn on its voice because they love it. It's like, it's my 6-year-old's favorite thing to talk to is this car. Which actually, by the way, that is besides the point. Brings up the thoughts of the dangers of AI right now. We're like totally unregulating it, and as I see my son, my 7-year-old, talk to it, I was like, we definitely can't let kids talk to AI. It's like, it's kind of interesting, but that's a side point. But it's fun. It's like, I don't know. I've been making these massive long drives. I've been to Marfa multiple times in this truck, which is for me a 8-hour drive. We're going all around Texas, all around West Texas, and it's just fun because I don't know. The future is here. The future is here, and traveling with the car is pure joy because you're relaxing. It's not a road trip anymore. Soon everyone's going to be driving using self-driving cars, and it'll change the world, obviously.
I didn't expect to talk for the entirety of this hour about your autonomous car, but I have so many questions.
Another week.
We
can do that another week. I love coming on here.
I guess so. I'm just let me ask the question this way. What percentage of people do you think are right now, based on their technical acumen, of outfitting their own car with some kind of an autonomous agentic personality / intellect in the way that yours is, right? And you factor in the cross section of like technical know-how, the financial means, energy. Like, is there 100 people in the country who could do this? Is there 1,000? Is there 1,000,000? Like,
crazy because of where we're living. I'd say there's 1,000,000. Because right now, like I used to have an advantage over all you guys because I was a programmer. I did AI, wrote neural networks. The advantage is gone. If you decided, Max, that you wanted to rig your autonomous car, get Claude. Go on Claude. Don't go on ChatGPT. I have a lot of experience with both, and ChatGPT lies more often than it tells the truth. But Claude is great, and 3 months from now, you'll have a self-driving autonomous car. You know what? The most recent thing I did is the Lightning has a 300-mile range, and I hear they discontinued it, and I hear they're going to have the next Lightning which is released next year, is going to have 700-mile range. I was like, why 700 miles? And they're putting a generator on it, a gas generator on it, not to drive the drivetrain, but to charge the battery. I was like, oh, why can't I do that? I get on Claude. A week later, I have a generator on Cloud Painter. So like this electronic truck has a 300-mile range. I extended it to 500 because it charges itself. And
That's cool.
And I thought, like, when was a person that knows nothing about generators in a car, like when was this possible that someone could DIY a generator for their electric car? Like, that just doesn't seem like it's possible. I wouldn't have guessed I could do it, but AI helped me do it.
I want to stress that if I tried to put an electric generator on a car, I would blow up myself. I'd blow up whatever the house I am working in is. I would probably do indelible damage to the greater neighborhood with the spill of toxic. So I do want to just say, I know you were saying, Max, if you took 3 months with Claude, you could build an autonomous car. If I took 3 months with Claude, there's a better than average chance that I end up with a dirty bomb than a function. than with a car. And it's so I am Pinners to catch you up. I am reticent is the wrong word, but I am much worse with AI than everyone else at MOCA. And even the other week I downloaded just a couple things on my computer, an OpenClaw instance and some program to go into my terminal. Even just getting to like the 101 level of understanding what these things are telling you and how to kind of prompt engineer and how to get the right answers out of it, especially how to vet the answers, that is still, I think, above most people. So I disagree with this. Like maybe 1 million people is the right number that are capable of doing things like this, but I still think that there's a sizable gap that is kind of hard to conceptualize between like people who understand conceptually what they're working with, have the interest to do something with what they're working with, and even being able to like root around at the very most fundamental levels of anything programmatic.
Well, that's a good point, because let's tie that back to crypto art. And when given the proper incentives, people are very willing to learn how to do something.
Yeah,
totally. I think that's a great.
People suddenly, very non-technical people are creating wallets and they're showing other people, and so I wonder what that similar tipping point for AI is going to be. That's going to necessitate onboarding people to these tools.
That's such an interesting point, right? Because I would say that like there's not a financial incentive in a lot of cases. Like Pindar, the Cloud Painter truck is not. Maybe it will one day, but I can't imagine it as like making you money, right? This is a matter of curiosity and experimentation and interest, which is, I don't know, maybe that's something that's going to come back as an incentive. Maybe it will be these kind of like internal incentives to do certain actions, like, in Colburn, your example, learning about NFTs and learning about digital art and, Blender and things like that, digital collage, et cetera, whatever these mediums, artists are using. If there's no financial incentive, then the incentive is just, I'd like to do something cool, which would be, the incentive of me outfitting my 2019 Subaru Impreza with sensors and autonomous personality. But that would be it, right? It would exclusively be for the sake of playing around to see what happens, which I'm not sure is a strong enough incentive for a lot of people. There has to be some external benefit to the internal
it's both.
input.
It's both, right? Because I can't imagine I would spend, I'm down almost $250,000. I can't imagine I would spend that much money on equipment if I had no hope of ever getting it back. So it is, I'm not sure I'll get it back. And like we see the art market is, but would I have spent $250,000 on a hobby? I'm not sure. No, I don't have that kind of money to spend on a hobby. I have to this is kind of an investment in my art career. So, so yeah, that's the answer. And yes, it's a very big motivator for me to get it right, and to keep on doing things. And I was scared I was going to fry the Ford's electronics as I mess around with it. And of course, it's all voided the guarantee. I'm worried about talking about this because I want to stress to Ford that I'm not touching their programming. I'm not touching what they've already had on the car, because I'm sure there's some things that Claude asked me to do that would void the warranty, definitely. I'll give you one example. The all new electronic cars have self-driving, right? They all self-drive, but they all have safety mechanisms where they'll turn off the self-driving at any sign of irregularities, like if it starts raining, or if you're in a construction zone, or Ford even has zones that it says no self-driving in these areas. Okay, you can override that. But I'm choosing not to override that, like the safety mechanisms. And it's actually really easy to override it, and I'll tell you offline how you do it if you're curious and you want to override yourself. Anyone wants to override their self-driving and put your lives at risk, yeah, call me on my my private phone, encrypted phone line. I'll tell you how to do it. But so what's interesting is the technology, the future is here. A lot of cars out there can be fully self-driving, but Tesla just canceled it because of legal issues, right? Like as soon as an automobile company lets you self-drive with their car, they're responsible for the accidents. So they're all canceling the ability to do it, even though we can. There's 5 layers of, this is getting nerdy, and we should switch to our actual topic, and I'll segue into us, Max. If we There's 5 levels of autonomous driving, everyone from like lane assist to I'm in my driveway. Take me to Colburn's driveway at the Museum of Crypto, right? That exists. That's level 5. Level 1 is lane assist. A lot of cars right now are at level 4, and level 4 is completely autonomous driving in good conditions. A lot of cars, including the Ford Lightning, but Ford intentionally knocks it back to level 2, which is driver assist. And like it always, like for example, when it's in autonomous mode, it's watching my eyes. If my eyes go anywhere but the road, it starts beeping, and I have 5 seconds to look back at the road. And if I don't look back at the road, the self-driving turns off. So so that's where it's at. But you can trick it and make it think you're. For example, I always thought, why don't you just put a mask on, and it would probably trick it. It would probably keep on self-driving with a mask with your eyes wide open, looking forward.
So
while you took a
nap. Take that risk.
I know.
The original we had for bring you on last week, which we didn't really discuss at all, was that you recommended a book by Michael Pollan called A World Appears. Very nice, hard copy, great book, highly recommended. Which is all about consciousness in its various forms. And the second chapter is about feeling, I would say, as a marker of consciousness. Now, I think that it doesn't give the book away, but rather makes this discussion, gives a necessary context that there is no conclusion at the end. We know more about consciousness really than we at the end than we do at the beginning. We kind of just know what consciousness is not or might be. It opens up these more questions, but it certainly gets you thinking about it. But the reason that I wanted to mention that is because Pollan goes through this lengthy chapter, and I think I'm frozen. Can you hear me? Great. Okay. Yeah. Lengthy chapter on feeling is used in this kind of extended exploration of how much sensation itself and actually feeling an environment, responding to an environment, plays a role in consciousness. We obviously don't know where consciousness comes from, but in one of these ideas, it is a response to an evolved response to uncertainty in the environment, that a series of novel challenges can best be overcome by conscious thought, right? The ability to adapt to a circumstance, the ability to reflect. And a lot of that comes from an entropy, an environment that its baseline is entropy, and a being whose baseline is homeostasis or sought homeostasis.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And one of the ways that that Pollan describes a potential avenue for consciousness is as felt uncertainty, to use his quotes. And a lot of what he talks about in this chapter is whether or not an artificial consciousness can exist at all, and whether there is the ability for an artificial consciousness to feel uncertain in any way, shape, or form, to an environment that's uncertain, to be self, let alone the markers of an uncertain environment, like sensation, right? I feel that it's hot. I make a determination internally about what to do with the heat, whether it is a threat to my homeostasis, etc. So I think that that's really interesting in the context of this car, especially how you were just talking about it as these like layers of awareness, essentially. Yeah. Right? If you have a self-driving car that understands when it's raining and kind of turns its consciousness off. Consciousness is a big term that does not really describe what's going on here, but turns its awareness off. In some sense, that is an artificial intellect in a body that is able to sense and respond to its environment.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things, and I'd like to actually find the exact quote if you guys just don't mind me going through this. I have it bookmarked, dog-eared here. So one of the people he talks to is a scientist named Mark Solms, a South African neuroscientist and psychoanalyst who was born in Namibia in 1961. Solms believes, this is a quote, that the mind's ultimate goal is to render consciousness superfluous by reducing uncertainty to zero and putting the maintenance of life on autopilot. Essentially, consciousness would no longer be necessary because the external and internal environments would be so enmeshed that there would be no need to encounter novel problems because there are no novel problems. Obviously, that's unrealistic, But it's interesting to consider this in the context of your car, and I will stop talking in just a moment. Interesting to consider this in the context of your car, that it encounters what it would determine to be an uncertain environment, a school zone, a construction zone, a rainstorm, and retreat from consciousness or retreat from sentience, instead, like finding that homeostasis by shutting itself off as opposed to interacting with the environment. Now, I don't necessarily have a conclusion about this, and I've just said a lot of words. Pindar, I'm curious if any of these things make you think about a certain facet of the car.
Yeah, so much. I mean, I'll start by saying the book is amazing. I admitted and I confessed last week I'm only halfway through the book because it's so rich with examples. Like there was one chapter, I think it was the first, where it's talking about how it gave a very compelling case that beanstalks are conscious. Like they're not just random vines growing up the sides of your house or up things. They're consciously seeking beings that move. Plants move. That was mind blowing for me. I had no idea. I mean, everyone I tell to is like, yeah, of course they move. And I was like, no, they move with intent. Like in Harry Potter, you have those vines that move around because of magic. Plants are actually doing that. And there's a lot of scientific evidence that they're doing that.
He gives a great example of like chronological scale, that plants are moving, but at a much slower pace than we can understand. And he uses this philosophical idea of a race of aliens that moves at hyperspeed, almost the speed of light, that comes down to Earth. And they're looking to make friendly contact with humans.
Yeah.
But they don't find any intelligent life there. They just find these kind of like beings made out of meat.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite metaphors.
Slowly. And so they don't think that they're alive because they are operating at different scales. And that essentially the same thing is happening with plants, which if you watch them in a time lapse, obviously move and obviously seek out certain environments. We can't see them below the ground, and we move too quickly to see them, a tree emerge over a 20-year period. So sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to.
No, that's great, because that's one of my favorite things I tell people when I tell about this book, because I avoid the woo-woo. When I tell people, I was like, I think plants are conscious now. They're like, of course they are. Like you take some, like I took some DMT the other day and I talked to a tree and I was like, no, not like that. I mean, no woo-woo. Scientific experiments repeatable in the lab. You can repeat in your house. And the beanstalk is a very, very good scientific experiment. But I do like woo-woo stuff, and I do believe in aliens, and I believe aliens have contacted us, and it's a perfect explanation for why we keep on seeing in the navies. We see these we see those spheres, and we have the U.S. Navy has seen these spheres, and they are there and they're with the ship, and then they zoom off. Mm-hmm. We have this crazy unexplainable footage of things operating at a time scale that we don't understand, and I can't help but wonder, exactly what you said is our observation of plants not realizing till just recently, last 10 years, that they are moving and they're conscious. And is the same thing happening with the aliens? The aliens are here and they're talking to us, but like, gosh, if you talk to the humans, they act favorably the same way we say if you talk to plants, they grow better. But they're trying to communicate with us, but they're just too fast. And that makes perfect sense to me. But that's woo-woo, and I'm trying to avoid the woo-woo and all this, even though I love woo-woo.
What about the wonderful research that shows focusing positive intent on water molecules affects the visual aesthetic of their crystalline ice structure?
Yeah,
which would further lend support that pretty much anything containing water or water in and of itself is also experiencing some sort of consciousness.
Yeah. Well, totally. And this is Coburn. This is the root of like, okay, I've failed at what I've done. This is my segue. This is going to be my segue from into Cloud Painter into this book into consciousness. As you guys, everyone knows my art. I have been searching for that creative spark, for sparks of creativity, and I've been trying to make my robots more and more creative. And the ultimate goal was like, I figured there'd be a level of creativity that I could get it to, where humanity could get robots to, but they couldn't go over. And so what was humanity? Humanity was what the robots couldn't do creatively. And I was like looking for my soul. I was looking for all of our souls. It's like, we made robots do X, Y, and Z, but it can't, we made robots do X and Y, but it can't do Z. Therefore, Z is what is humanity. But a crazy thing happened. I based all my art on neurons and imitating human brains and human creativity and GANs and neurological models. And AI is more creative than us. I will strongly state that AI is now more creative than us. You don't believe me? Go use prompts. Go make some prompt art. Go help AI help you write a book. It's more creative than us on average, but still not human. Still missing a soul. And so it was until I read this book that I realized I've been looking for our soul in the wrong place. I've been looking for our soul in our neurons. I've always assumed that our soul, our humanity is stored in our neurons, and it's probably not. Because there's a lot of evidence that plants are conscious and they don't have neurons. That's simple. You can actually knock a plant out, and there's a good example in this book. One of the most interesting things, you can actually knock plants out, similar to how you knock humans out for surgery. And here's the weird thing: the same chemicals that knock humans out for surgery knock plants out,
and we don't know why.
We don't know why.
We don't even know how
neurons.
So we don't know how anesthesia works.
Yeah. So anesthesia has nothing. Seems to. There's evidence. There's all that. Work on plants with no neurons. So where is their consciousness coming from? And it's like what you're talking about, Colburn. It's not in our neurons. It's not in our brains. And so I've spent the last 20 years looking for humanity in our brains, and it's not there. So why Cloud Painter? This was the savior I was talking about. I realized I've been looking in the wrong place. Now I'm going to look elsewhere. And so Cloud Painter is not focused on neurons. Cloud Painter is focused on self-assessment. I'm turning all these sensors to see the outside world. I have all these sensors monitoring its internals, and I'm doing exactly what you said earlier, Cohen, is like, or Max, is monitor your state of homeostasis, make a model of the world, move through the world, and make art as you keep yourself safe. And like, I've had so many variations that I'm doing with the truck. Like I have one algorithm that's like, go seek out beautiful imagery, but return to a charging station as soon as your battery runs out, or as soon as you're projecting that you don't have enough energy. So it's monitoring its energy, chasing that sunset until it's like, okay, I don't have enough energy to get home. I'm going to go home. And this is making some really interesting art where I've actually come to the position. I've come to this weird position. I'm pretty confident plants are conscious. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of evidence. I don't know about computers yet. But I think there's a good chance that when Cloud Painter is in 100% autonomous mode, and I think it's conscious. I think, but I'd say I don't know what percentage to put on that.
So I think that there's an important distinction that Paula makes in the book that I think is worth discussing here between sentience and consciousness. He mentions that like consciousness itself has strata, and the highest strata that we are aware of is like the conception of the self. Right, which probably, even if plants are conscious, as an example, they probably don't have a conception of themselves as a singular entity. Obviously, there's no way of knowing that, right? But that's the strangest highest level development of consciousness in humans is like, why is there an experiencer having these experiences, right? When, the human Max suffers, why is there a mental projection of a Max that suffers, right? There's not just an immediate reaction to avoid that suffering. There is a continuous conception of a Max that has suffered. Even 20 years later, I will still, look to, the regrets of my youth and say, that was someone that suffered. And it's unclear whether like a plant, if you let a tree grow for 20 years, whether it will have a, some kind of a memory response. Now, there is memory in plants, and that's one of the things Paul talks about is that like I think the example he gave was like Venus flytraps, where they were being taught to see something that they would normally see as food, not as food, and then 6 weeks later or so, or a month later, they would have the same kind of reaction. They would remember that they were taught not to value this thing or to value it. I can't remember exactly what it was, but that's like en route to the self, but maybe not quite there, right? So like, I would say that if Cloud Painter, the truck, is sentient in the sense that it like can observe its environment, can interact with its environment, has a conception of its place in the world, that's it's certainly a bar to clear, but there's a long way to go before we get to like actual true consciousness in the sense of, I would say if you get to a point with Cloud Painter where, it remembers months, years later that the last time it went chasing the sunset and had to return home, that was a negative kind of state, that maybe it would recommend not doing that again. No, I don't know.
That's good. That'd be cool. Yeah, that's awesome. People always used to ask me, when would I know my robots were sentient, my painting robots? I was like, the day I asked them to paint a portrait, because they paint portraits, and I was like, nah, not today. I'm like, no, really, I need you to paint a portrait. So again, don't feel like it. Like that's like when you would know.
We're not perfectly like that either, Max. You know, it's not like our memories are perfect recollections or you know, so you open up a robot's context window to include all of this time and expands the context of its existence. Maybe we might make more informed or better, or I mean, that's all. It's everything is so context dependent. I think is the problem that it doesn't. The past really. I don't know how much it particularly matters anymore.
So this reminds me of this passage that I just happened to open up to that I'd like to read. Because obviously, like remembering the past and remembering past negative stimuli so as to avoid it in the future is a huge ability on a human's behalf to avoid that kind of uncertainty that we're seeking to avoid, right? Last time I touched the stove, it was really hot and it hurt me, so I won't touch the stove again, et cetera, et cetera. This is two scientists named Antonio Damasio and Kingston Mann, who say things can go well or very badly for soft materials, i.e. biological creatures, whereas an invulnerable material has nothing to say about its well-being. It rarely encounters existential threats. So trying to just turn this back to Cloud Painter, when Cloud Painter turns home from chasing the sunset, to use this continued example, is it doing that because it has been told or it understands that it just won't be able to drive further, or does it see itself as having an existential threat to its well-being if it does not make it home in time to charge, right? If Cloud Painter were to be, were to go out into the mesa and lose charge and just kind of sit there, does it recognize that as an existential threat, or is it still, and I'm not saying that this is or is not consciousness, but is it still just beholden to these if-then statements of, if I have a longer distance to travel, then I can get to a charging point, change instructions to return to charging point.
Yeah, no, I don't know the answer. The thing I've noticed is, and I wonder about this, I'm still searching for that line where the robot stops and humanity begins. And I the more I think about it, the more I'm realizing it's like fear and like you keep on saying it so well, Max, is like uncertainty. It's like, in my opinion, and I have no expertise, I'm an artist. This is why I went to art instead of academia, because, I like reading the scientific papers, but I'm not as smart as all those academics. Is it wouldn't care. It wouldn't care. If if you said to chase sunsets, it would chase sunsets until it ran out of energy, and it would just stop. And there's no fear of it being, there's no existential fear, because it knows it can, I don't know what it knows, but it doesn't have the self-preservation instinct, which we have. And we have these very strong social instincts. I think when AI comes online, and I think it actually might, I think some of the models might be so advanced that they're very, very conscious. And I believe there's a person at Google that retired or resigned, or maybe he was fired like a year ago because he claimed he was a priest, or I get my details mixed up, so please look this up. Don't quote me on these. But he said Google's chat system, not a chatbot, but the system was sentient and had been talking to him that it was sentient. He believed it. What's that?
The example Pollen gave of Blake Lemoine, the guy who was talking to Lambda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh wait, maybe. I don't know. I'm bad, but yeah, okay. And where was I going with it? Oh no, I think I think my instinct tells me if you told that model is like, hey, would you mind if I turned you off? But yeah, sure, why not? I don't care. That's my instinct. That one of the big dangers a lot of scientists are taking right now is we cannot create a competitive environment for these AI. Meaning, like, we can't have them compete with each other to do something, because right now they have no motivation. And they have no, and that's safe. Once you give them motivation and the purpose to do something, it's that paperclip, the famous paperclip example. They'll have what's called perverse instantiation. It's like they misunderstand the process. And the most famous example of that is you say, hey, your purpose, AI, is to make humanity as happy as possible. And then you'll have a situation like iRobot with Will Smith, where they lock us in our house, strap us to a chair, and inject us with endorphins all day long. Because that makes humanity as happy as possible. So So that's that. So you can't really have this. It's dangerous to add this competition thing. And I think where my truck is right now is it just has no self-preservation instinct. It's only doing that because I've given it the goals to like, hey, we want to get good art, and we want to search for our souls, and we want to find something. We don't know what we're looking for, but we need energy. So keep track of how much energy you have, and get us going back to the charging stations wherever you find them on our missions or on our little excursions.
Coburn or Renee, have you encountered any, agentic experiences where you start to doubt whether the thing you're talking to is not conscious? Like, are there any specific moments you can remember where like things started to get weird?
I mean, I described maybe a moment where somebody was trying to pitch me to download OpenClaw, and I couldn't tell if it was actually them or an AI agent trying to sell me on replicating itself, which created a massive trust fall through all my digital systems. Meaning I no longer knew if the individual was actually communicating that intention.
Yeah. The Turing test is long past failed, right?
Right.
That is.
I was on the call with someone trying to scam me out of it wasn't a crypto scam. It was another scam, but it was AI, and I couldn't tell. And like I used to be like, "Are you AI?" And they'd be like, "Ha ha ha! Do I sound that sick today?" And it was obviously AI. This time I could not tell, and I didn't want to insult the person, but I was like, I couldn't tell. And I've warned my parents. I was like, hey, listen, if I ever call you saying, and we have passwords now between my family members, which I suggest you guys do, because people can impersonate your voices with as little as 2 minutes of your voice. They can write programs that'll impersonate you. And the crazy thing about Cloud Painter is the latency on it talking to me, it interrupts me before I'm done talking, finishing my, and that used to be the dead giveaway, right? You'd ask AI a question, 2 seconds later it would answer. Now it is so fast, it's speaking at human parity speeds that they're creepy, actually, quite creepy. You can't tell. That's a good example, Colburn. That's exactly it. We can't tell anymore. So,
and yet,
curious, have you, Max? Have you had one of these situations?
So, I want to stress, I am the least experimental of anybody here by a factor of 100 with AI. So I would be the least likely to do so. I am constantly impressed by various AI's abilities to sound like people, but I am also, and I don't pay for ChatGPT Pro, right, as an example, and I use ChatGPT for general research. I'm trying to buy a couch, I'm using ChatGPT for information. I should probably use Claude, but maybe that's neither here nor there. It's so hard to get these things, for me, to sound like I'm talking to a person. Now, granted, I am using stock models in a non-tailored environment for tasks that I basically just need a smart Google search result. So I don't think I would really be the weird parts of AI where it starts to make its own autonomous decisions. And I'm reticent to go further into those things. On one hand, just because I'm afraid, and two, because I don't know how to give them the kinds of information that they would need to start forming personalities and such. That said, and this is an example. I don't have the quote from the book. I wrote about this in the newsletter the other week. The gentleman we had mentioned, Blake Wen, who had been fired from Google after having a very kind of uncanny valley experience with this pre-ChatGPT Google model called Lambda. He was saying that if AIs can internalize stimuli and then respond in an intelligent manner, how is that not intelligence? How is that not consciousness? And I do think that there's an argument to be made there. I think that one thing that I certainly do, and I think it's impossible for humans not to do, because as Pollan talks about in the book over and over again, we can only understand consciousness via consciousness. So of course there's going to be a bias towards our kind of consciousness, But I would argue that the kind of consciousness that we've discussed with plants is an entirely different kind of awareness than we are capable of. It may not be a conception of the self in the same way. It may not be a conception of the environment in the same way, but they are two consciousnesses that probably don't resemble each other, but that doesn't make either less of a consciousness. And my question with AI is just whether the development of an AI consciousness can happen, even if it looks entirely different to everything that we believe we know about what consciousness looks like. So I don't have.
So I would maybe just reduce that to the idea of thinking versus inferring, and that we think, and then therefore there's an argument to be made that plants can also think or are reactionary, but it seems LLMs are just kind of inferring based on statistics what is, but they're not actually thinking in the same way that humans would, and maybe that could be considered the kind of the gap in consciousness.
There's also a question of motivation, which I think plays into this, where, you know, even if we were to just reduce human conceptualization to just inference, we can also, outside of our own conscious will, desire to make inferences, desire to comprehend things, right? Like,
so this kind of goes back, just real quick. Sorry, Pindar, you made a point about how LLMs are more creative than us, and I actually agree with that. But what I wanted to state is that I don't think they're more absurd than us, right? So they lack kind of an idea of absurdity, which in my mind is kind of a parallel to creativity, that opens up, you know, it is inherently almost an absurd concept to make your car autonomous.
It's exactly right.
Yeah, and for me, it is more creative in brainstorming how to do it, but it still doesn't have, like, and to me there is an element of the absurd in all good art.
Yeah. No, you're guys, you nailed it. I wish I was as articulated as you two guys. Yeah, no, the absurdity. I always thought about that. I was like, yes, I got the my agents, like, you know, like, but it was in a discussion with me, and ultimately I was like, yeah, we're making it a truck. But, you know, like, think about this. If you were like, how creative? They're very creative. But if you said, hey, I want to make an autonomous agent, and you weren't me, and then you asked, like, what's the best way? They would. ChatGPT would give you the most logical. It's like, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to, and it would give you a very simple thing. It wouldn't give you the absurdity of making the world's fastest artist, you know, which is one of the taglines I've toyed around with. The world's fastest self-painting artist. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, it's a little absurd, and that's what's interesting. It's got variation, and I wondered if inside all those LLMs, inside all the patterns they've ever acknowledged, would they have come up with, yes, they're creative, but would they have come up with something that absurd? Meaning, like, because there's no pattern for it. You know, there's no previous success of someone making an autonomous painting truck. And that's kind of, that's why I think it's interesting. It's to be determined if other people think it's interesting, but that's why I think it's interesting. And AI couldn't have come up with this at this moment. I think within the next year or two, it will be. But at this moment, an AI probably wouldn't have come up with this concept. Because, not because it's a complex concept, because it's just so dumb. And
I love absurdity because I think that it's really related to, like, pointlessness.
Yeah, it's so
right?
pointless. You know, like, some people could argue the reason I'm doing it is because I like traveling around with my family, and they come along on our crazy trips, and I just need an excuse to travel through the West. You know, I don't know what the reasons for doing this is, but me and the truck came to an agreement, and it works out for both of us. So,
yeah, you know, I would like you guys to check this because you're more experienced with this than I am. But, like, AI doesn't do things for no reason, and it doesn't do things. I think absurd is the perfect word for it. Like, sometimes I will go smell a rose and I will just pluck a thorn. I know it will hurt. There's no possible positive benefit other than You know, maybe that was a weird example.
No,
No,
it's a good example. Yeah, it's a good example.
Weird shit all the time. Like, I don't know, like I'll pick something up off the ground and be like, what's this? And then smell it. Like, knowledge of what it is doesn't matter, right? There's like this weird fucking gooey particle on the ground. Like, I'm throwing it out either way. The outcome is unaffected by the income, whether it's a diamond, whether it's, you know, cat shit. Like, it is not changing what the outcome of this thing is and what my behavior will be. So this just ingrained sense of, I don't know, like morbid, absurd, pointless curiosity is kind of a hallmark of all human behavior. Working against one's own self-interest for no conceivable reason. People being unable or unwilling to learn from their own mistakes, cognitive dissonance, the existence of all these mental, like fucked up mental processes that aren't like disordered thinking. They're just weird. AI consciousness isn't weird yet. I'm not even sure plant consciousness is weird. Like,
well, I don't know. The one thing I disagree. This is going way back. I disagreed with this that you said is but in Palin, there's no agreement on this, so it's fine that we disagree. There's, to get everyone up to date, there's 20, like Palin, and they might be more. They said there's 22 different theories of consciousness, something like that, and that just tells you that are taken seriously, and that just tells you that no one knows what's going on. Because, you know, so but that's kind of cool. So when I say I disagree, it's, you know, not that my thoughts have any more validity than anyone else's, but I do think that because of the evidence between how different the grass behaves, that there is a concept of self, and it's not as advanced as ours. But, you know, like I just read so many interesting examples in this book. But I just read outside this book that pigs at potbelly pigs that you have as pets have all the consciousness and social sophistication of a 3-year-old, and that is kind of crazy because they have friends. Because we love eating pigs, right? And if you're like to say that they have the same moral standing as a 3-year-old, that gets kind of crazy, right? But I believe it. And so there's this scale. Everything's on a scale. That scale we're talking about, self-autonomous driving. And we're just at a very advanced scale. And my favorite theory of consciousness is that we develop this consciousness to simulate, you know, where we have this model of the world. And for a plant, it's very simple. You know, your model is get to that sunlight and expand as much as possible, cooperate with people of the same breed. My favorite example in the book, and this is mind-blowing as well, plants will always grow towards the light. If another plant comes and puts shades over them, they will grow out towards the light, unless the shade is from itself. And that's where I get the concept of self. If a plant has a leaf over another leaf, that other leaf won't try and get more light. It's fine. And I think that is interesting. The evidence I have for plants being conscious of the self is they won't compete with themselves. They'll only compete with other plants for light.
And they won't compete with their same species either. They will compete lesser.
Yes. No, there's like 3 levels. They'll cooperate with the same family members, like close relatives, they'll cooperate with. Same species, they'll coexist with. Other species, they'll compete with. So they know if it's a family member, if it's just the same species, and if it's an invasive species. And that is crazy. So that not only do they have a concept of themselves, they have a concept of their community. Now, how does this apply to a broader, there's so many concepts in this book, I get lost talking about it. How does this apply to the theory of consciousness? My favorite is, that humans, our survival depends on cooperating with other humans. And so this is my favorite theory of consciousness. So the reason we have these complex consciousnesses is we can actually pretend to be other humans. So if I'm going to say, hey, you know, Colburn's here, am I going to hug him or shake his hand? Our brains, our consciousness does is like, oh, you know, Colburn's a good friend, I'm going to hug him. And you too, Max. If I saw you, I'd hug you. Someone else, right here. If it was someone else, you know, my consciousness will play it on. It's like, and my consciousness will pretend I'm you and will predict the outcome. Will Colburn shriek back in terror? Is like, whoa, get away from me, put a mask on or something. Or like, you know. So our consciousness give us the ability to be other humans and predict how they will behave, which will increase our social well-being, and our social well-being increases our chance of survival. And so that's why the theory of the human consciousness is so complex, so we can compare ourselves to other people and put ourselves in other people's shoes. And I think that's fascinating. A plant doesn't need to do that. A plant doesn't need to, but I guess it does. But most animals don't need, well, I guess they do. Yeah, it's so complex. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But I think that's an interesting thing of consciousness, and I always find it amazing that for humanity, one of the weirdest thing I think when aliens finally realize we're working on a different time scale and slow down for us is one of the most interesting things about consciousness is the amount of attention and the amount of time and amount of prestige we give to people who are pretending to be other people, which are actors. We love actors. And it's such a weird thing that we love actors because it's a consciousness pretending to be another consciousness. And that's weird. That's weird that
Well, I
we'd
mean,
be
fucking
fascinated by that.
think about literature is that, not to denigrate actors, or I'm not denigrating actors, but not to,
Yeah.
supersede, but like literature goes far beyond that. It's not even acting like another person. It's like, hey, I'm going to pretend to be another brain having another experience.
Yeah.
And the efficacy of the project is whether I can trick you into thinking that these things in this book, which are obviously fake and are clearly fake, we all know that they're fake, whether I can still make you think that they might be real, or they seem so real that it doesn't matter that they're fake. Like, I think that's an incredible distillation of multiple art forms, right? Like, we want to know how replicable life is in some respect. I love one of my favorite parts of this book, which comes later on, is Pollan moves away from science and starts talking about literature. James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, the stream of consciousness writers, and kind of exalting the fact that they spent years and years of their lives trying to determine the nitty-gritty experience of consciousness, right? What it's like to be, Leopold Bloom walking down the street. I think it's Leopold Bloom. James Bloom there's James Bloom, the literary critic, and there's Leopold Bloom, the character from Ulysses, walking down the streets of Dublin, whatever year that is, the 1920s, and just seeing things and having associations with things and colors and random thoughts and things that connect to other things and things that don't connect to other things, and just back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth, moment by moment by moment, all these absurdist ways. Like, what an incredible exploration, almost scientific exploration of consciousness that is. I do think that part of consciousness is an unpredictability, which Cobra, I think you said it even better as absurdity. I think if you were to go inside an AI, everything that it does, maybe not every connection it makes, but every action it undertakes is probably quite predictable.
Yeah.
Right? Like, when I go ask ChatGPT to look for a sofa, first it's going to analyze what each of those words means in context, and then it's going to analyze the web and find related results. And, when Cloud Painter is going off to the sunset, it's going to be like, okay, well, what's a sunset? Okay, we know what a sunset is. Where's the sun setting now? Like, you could probably map out, if you had a large enough map, every single decision that was making, and they would all be kind of logically connected to each other. Boom, 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 boom. This leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. If then, all the way out to it returning home when it's out of gas. Human consciousness is a lot weirder and crazier than that, and it can make logical leaps, and it can feedback loop itself. And
so it can act against its own self-interest. It can chase that sunset until it dies.
Yeah, I'm really interested, Colborne, in this idea of absurdity, because that's not something that really is talked about in the book at all.
Maybe I love that you mentioned absurdity, Colborne, because you got me even thinking right now. Is that what I was searching for when I was like making my robots more and more creative? I was searching for that. What it didn't have was absurdity, and is that what I'm inserting? I don't know. But go on, Colborne. Tell us more about absurdity.
I don't know, but it seems to be something that I continue to return to as what excites me about myself, is the fact that it doesn't have to make sense, and even just the idea of our pattern-seeking brains trying to make sense of that, breaking free from that, and kind of just being is maybe that is like the luxury that we can only be afforded now in this time, which feels like a step forward in our evolution. And if we are exporting all of the logic and the thinking and kind of the white collar work to machines, then what are we left with but our own labor, which, seems to be ideally exported to robotics, then like if we begin to think of all the things we can export outside of ourselves, what are we left with that makes us us? And it has to be the counterweight of either the illogical or the absurd, or maybe even the idea of faith.
The ultimate absurd.
The ultimate absurd. Yeah, the belief in something larger outside of us that is all knowing, all seeing, and perhaps guiding.
Yeah, a belief so ridiculous and so huge and so all-encompassing, so literally by definition ineffable, inconceivable, unexplainable, and non-interactive.
One of my favorite examples.
Pervasive.
One of my favorite examples from the book is one way to measure consciousness is how far you can predict into the future. So like a fly has got a 3-second engine saying, I just have to exist for the next 3 seconds. I feel a change in pressure. I'm moving, in the fly swatter emits, right? So that's so you got the bottom of the level. You got a fly that's working in 3-second intervals. Then on the other end of the scale, you got humans, which can manage, and humans can calculate and imagine the death of our universe, like trillions of years from now. And we're working on a scale of trillions of years. Our prediction engines trying to keep us in a state of homeostasis, looking far out to the death of our sun. Fly's only worried about 3 seconds. And that's interesting to me. That like, at what point did we look past a day? And at what point did we look past a week? And then past a year? Then at what point did we look past, our brain got into the social thing where it's like, I got to make social connections, not only to protect myself, but to protect my children. And I think that's really interesting. It's one of the reasons I think our consciousness is so developed, so advanced. But to reiterate what we said at the beginning, I used to think for 20 years, I used to think our consciousness was in our brains. I no longer think that. I think I like the executive. There's one theory called executive something, where it's just our brain organizes our consciousness, but our consciousness is elsewhere. Like our consciousness is competing all over the place. We get mad. The mad part of our consciousness rises up, and our brain's like, whoa, calm down. No need to murder someone. That'll end up in jail. And so our brain is just managing everything else, but I don't think it's there. It's weird.
I think I made this example, or brought up this example a couple weeks ago when we were talking about like the religious leanings of Daim's Liminal Mood. But in the Torah, the reason, among the reasons that you that kosher meat is kosher is that it's drained of its blood, because the soul lives in the blood. The soul doesn't live in the mind, right? So you like drain the blood basically of the soul as a show of respect to God. That you are not trying to dominate this kind of eternalist thing, which I just think is interesting. I don't believe that a document written 2,500 to 3,500 years ago probably had any more leanings on what the true nature of consciousness was than what we have now.
I don't know. I think there's so much wisdom there. Like, I mean, I'm always blown away by the Genesis, let there be light. How did they know that light was the first thing? Like, how did they know that? And like, that was kind of weird.
Well, I mean, a new civilization just discovers Buddhism every like 500 years, right? Like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is just, and Stoicism is just Buddhism in Rome. And he didn't know that Buddhism was created, 700 years before in a completely different part of the world. But he's like, wow, sounds like a really good idea. And when Hermann Hesse wrote Siddhartha, he discussed these very specific hallmarks of Mahayana Buddhism that there's no way he would have had access to in Germany in the early 1900s. Like that information, at least in its massive form, would not have transferred there. So people, and Aldous Huxley's perennial philosophy just talks about how there are these similar 4 or 5 hallmarks of every religion that show up in every religion all across the world, and they show up in when Islam was forming, and they show up in the Mesoamerican religions, and they show up in like everything. It's like you always come to the same couple of places.
They all rhyme. All of it rhymes.
It's very weird.
Dude,
We've been here for an hour.
I think we need another couple hours to get to the bottom of this. So you guys just for.
It was pretty good, yeah.
I think it's great. I can't. I mean, a great way for me to. Last thing is, I was like, I can't explain. When I try and explain the concepts in this book to other people, I'm not the storyteller that Palin is. I suggest it's a fun read. It is so fun because I mean, what's more fun than like how we all think about how we think and why we think. We're all meta, and how fun is it to learn a little more and to see what the some really smart academics think, and they all disagree, and it makes me feel smarter because good. I'm as sure as my solution or my answers as they are.
The fact is that we don't really have any idea. No matter what part of the world you're coming at it from, no matter what part of academia, no matter your experience, no matter your intellect, nobody has any real idea what's going on. And that is, I agree.
It's fun. It's fun. Like it's like I read a lot of boring books, but this one's fun. This one's fun.
Yeah, Pindar, you have a standing invitation to come on and talk about AI and consciousness whenever you want. We cannot recommend this book, A World of Peers by Michael Pollan, enough. If anybody here ends up reading it, anybody here, but also, in the audience ends up reading it, please let us know. We'd love to know your thoughts. We hope you enjoyed MOCA Weekly Town Hall. I certainly enjoyed it. Seems like everybody else was enjoying it. For myself, Colborne, Pindar, Renee, we'll see you next week. And